So, as usual, the left is contending with a nominee that we pretty much despise, and there's a lot of really good reasons. One of the really difficult things, and I touched upon this in my last talk when talking about Michael Brooks and how he united the left, is the idea that the left and progressives, and one of the most difficult parts of being involved in progressive politics is a lack of a unified message. And if you ask any 6 progressives individually why they voted for Bernie Sanders or for Elizabeth Warren even, why they voted as they did, we'll all have 6 different answers for you. And that seems really that screams of a lack of unity. But then if you go on Twitter during the campaign and you look at the critiques that Twitter lefties have of other people on Twitter, centrists, the Center for American Progress, neoliberal types, if you look at the replies to Neera Tanden on Twitter on any given day, you'll see something particularly more united, which isn't necessarily just the vitriol, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm referring to the message itself carries a sameness. There's a sameness to the Twitter backlash against, a Chris Matthews or a Joy Reid or a Neera Tanden that illustrates how the entire left was able to unite behind this one candidate. And there were clearly leftists who were committed to electing Elizabeth Warren. I have definitely seen them. I've interacted with them. I've formed some level of alliance with them. Ironically, most of them are to the left of me, the ones that I've seen. But the sameness of that message is... Ooh, nice. What would happen is you'd have some centrists making some convoluted talk about this is what one particular Bernie supporter said to me and I hate this particular dialectical approach by some group of Bernie supporters. And then a bunch of typical Twitter lefties who aren't really engaged in that online harassment deal, which is, the majority of Bernie's support base, just like the majority of any other candidate's support base. The kind of silent majority of Bernie supporters came out and they were so yeah, they go in response to this, some regular media commentator basically saying these are the parts of Bernie supporters I don't like and the behaviors that really bug me. Regular Bernie supporters would come out and be cool, I just want people to have healthcare. And that clearness, that cogency of that message, and it really illustrates how this one person got the entire left to kind of unite behind him, which is ultimately Bernie's was the coalition of people who just don't care about all the other BS. We just wanted people to have healthcare. And there was a contingent of Warren supporters, obviously, who cared immensely about Medicare-For-All and single payer, and they had their reasons for supporting Warren over Bernie. And I don't, I may not agree with those reasons, but I definitely respect them, right? More than I would respect, say, somebody thinking that Pete Buttigieg was a feasible path toward universal healthcare in the way that Bernie was. Yeah, so ultimately Bernie's was the coalition of people who want people to have healthcare. in a way that no other candidates was, right? Obviously, Warren had a real percentage of her coalition that did care immensely about Medicare for All, and that's what distinguished them from other establishment-friendly candidates, right? And Warren, I think, through her career, I will give her a lot of credit as having been capable of navigating the line between the political establishment and this insurgency throughout her own career. And that's what's made her a very effective politician. But unfortunately, she just kind of lost that thread in the campaign. And she tried to create a coalition that matched her political resume, and it kind of just blew up in her face because it was really difficult. You can't really unite those two groups electorally because they stand for rather diametrically opposed things. At least in my opinion, you know. And that's a fairly unnuanced opinion, so, you know, maybe I'll have more intelligent thoughts on it. The truth is, the reason I don't is probably mostly just because it's not really worth putting much thought into, right? Oh. Hold on one second. Cool. But yeah, the key difference between Bernie's coalition and Elizabeth Warren's coalition is that Warren obviously had a percentage of her supporters who genuinely, sincerely cared and had some theory of achieving universal health care that was coherent. But it wasn't the entirety of her coalition. For Bernie, that was probably the one unifying aspect of his... The one unifying aspect of his coalition was that you couldn't really be a Bernie supporter without caring about universal health care. You could be any number of other things, right? You could even be a Nosbol and support Bernie just by turning a blind eye to, like, his entire theory of global progressivism and global justice. But you really could not support Bernie Sanders without supporting Medicare for All, because the truth is, if you didn't, there was always a better candidate to go with. And the effectiveness of that message, right? And ultimately, and ultimately, that was the most justifiable and universalizing justification for supporting Bernie over any other candidate, was that, like, I wanted more people to have health care. And every other candidate had some kind of weird hang-up about, you know, oh, it's not the right time, we need to, like, temper our message, we need to start negotiating from the middle. Just, like, really weird, not even, like, it wasn't pragmatism, it was just moral middling. It was being pragmatic in your messaging just to avoid accountability to your lack of results. Which is something I'll give Obama a lot of credit for. He gave himself the room. He gave his supporters the room to hold him accountable for being such a disappointing president. A President Biden or a President Clinton from 2009 would never have been so easy to just say, this is somebody who did not live up to their expectations. Obama, like, the first day of his presidency, he shut down Guantanamo. He set the standard for us to hold him to, so that when he fell remarkably short of those standards, it was very easy to hold him to account, because he made all these promises and broke them. Or not broke. Broke is a harsh word. It's true, but it's a harsh word. Let's say failed to live up to them, right? That's something few other Democrats do, because they don't make commitments like that. And I'll give Biden credit. He's made some commitments like that. Not to healthcare, but to not to universal healthcare at least, but to things like $15 an hour minimum wage, right? If we don't pass that, that's something he's going to be accountable for. He'll probably be too old to pay any political price for it, but like, at the end of the day, there's something of a sincerity there that doesn't exist with, say, a Pete Buttigieg.
Who is this? The fool running
Or even
around
an
here.
Elizabeth Warren,
I found
right?
the truck you wanted.
And I have no doubt that Bernie would also have been a disappointing president, but he would have been, just from a perspective of like pure progress. Like, it's not about how short would he have fallen of his goals. It would have been how much would he have been able to accomplish via staffing, via negotiation. So ultimately, Bernie's coalition was just people who want everyone to have affordable access to healthcare. That was it. It was that simple. And ultimately, that was the reason I supported Bernie over Warren, over Buttigieg, over Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, Joe Biden, is I want people to have healthcare. And Bernie was the person who was going to get it properly for everyone. So that brings us to the, in my opinion, highly overcomplicated conversation of like, should I vote for Joe Biden? And there's so much going on, right? Like, and I get it. It's really difficult. There's so many questions, concepts of like, you know, he's a part of the establishment. He has voted to protect Capitol his entire life. And he's been middling in his so-called progressive accomplishments. You know, he deserves credit for like things like gun control. He passed the Violence Against Women Act, but those things go in tandem with, you know, a pretty atrocious crime bill, which again, to be fair, is the product of its time. Black leaders at the time were in support of it. But it's a very complicated issue of like, you know, what does Biden get credit for? What does he get held to account for? It's very difficult to vote for somebody who's that unexciting, along with, you know, the complexity and mess of the allegations against him. And my honest to God belief is none of that matters. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's not bullshit, but like when it comes to like making the choice of how you vote, literally nothing matters. It should just come back to that unifying equation about Bernie. If you supported Bernie Sanders and you're wondering like,
Damn, I gotta get the fuck on.
If you supported Bernie Sanders and your question is, should I vote for Joe Biden or should I not vote for Joe Biden? What is it that brought us all to support Bernie Sanders? I want people to have health care. That's it. That's what I care about. I want people to have access to health care. And I will always vote in the way that allows more people to have access to health care. This guy was floating for a moment. That's it. Same reason I supported Bernie. I want people to have access to healthcare. Just keep saying it. I want people to have access to healthcare. How do I vote in a way that gets more people access to healthcare? Oh, Jesus. Mission absolutely failed. So ultimately, that's the calculation, right? How do I vote in such a way that gets the most people access to healthcare? And if I vote in a swing state, and I vote for the Green Party candidate, I am increasing the chance that people are going to lose their healthcare access because there is a candidate who is going to have the power and will to minorly increase access to healthcare. Like, we have a solid chance of passing exactly that public option that Biden has. The House will definitely pass it. If we can make sure that, like, that disgusting bootlicking traitors like, Chris Coons and Joe Manchin don't have the power to sink such a bill. Get rid of the filibuster first and foremost. We have a solid chance to get a public option passed in Congress. And that's going to get people access to healthcare. That's going to get a lot of people access to healthcare. It's not enough. It's not enough, but we're never going to get to our goal we're never going to get to our end goal on policy by intentionally allowing the country to take steps backwards. It's just never going to happen. Trump is bad for a lot of people, and one of those people is left power, or you know what I'm talking about. Trump is as bad for left power as he is for anything else. For immigrants, for LGBTQ rights, for the Supreme Court. We don't have to argue about all of that. We're not going to get Medicare-For-All if Obamacare gets completely gutted. I mean, we could. It'll take 30, 40 more years. Because we have to rebuild the damage and death that repealing Obamacare is going to cause. There's going to be no rebuilding, or not. We're going to be caught up healing that damage, right? The amount of pain and suffering that so many people losing that kind of access to healthcare, that's going to have ripple effects that we're going to be contending with. And beyond all of that, even all of that, I'm overcomplicating it. I want people to have access to healthcare. I have one candidate who's going to expand it. I have another candidate who's going to take it away. One of those two is going to be president. One of those two is going to be president. I got to make sure it's the right one. There's a right one, there's a wrong one. Between the two choices we have, I want people to have access to healthcare. That's the only thing that should matter for you. That is the only thing that should matter. Do you want people to have access to healthcare? If so, there's a clear choice. And then we primary the living crap out of every single Democrat while we're at it. And in New York, AOC-endorsed candidates have swept the primaries, right? On a local level, we are taking back the New York Democratic Party. Carolyn Maloney is 1% ahead of her quote-unquote progressive challenger. There's a good chance that Suraj Patel is going to win that primary, which, I'm not a fan of Suraj Patel. I voted for Lauren Ashcraft, partly because Suraj Patel is very much he has really, really, really strong Pete Buttigieg vibes. He calls himself an Obama Democrat, which I don't think there's anything wrong with having worked for Obama, supporting Obama. He clings a little bit too hard to that resume line. He's funded heavily by hospitality, and he signals hard as an Obama who has a lot of progressive bona fides, but maybe not the willingness to put, especially someone like Patel, who's currently building political capital and building it through hoteliers and New York hospitality. This is clearly somebody who's not going fully grassroots with his funding and his power. That if you're building power through a financial establishment, you're going to be hard pressed to risk that political capital by standing up to the people funding you, right? And Suraj Patel has a lot of big money supporting him, right? He doesn't take PAC money, but he doesn't exactly take small donations either. So if he beats Carolyn Maloney, it'll obviously be a good thing. Especially because if he fails as a legislator, he's going to fail along the lines of being too corporate, too, like, just a establishment Democrat 2.0, right? Which is, I think the left has done a pretty good job not separating themselves from him, but, like, basically saying, like, listen, this isn't our candidate, right? Lauren Ashcraft, Pete Harrison, these are our candidates. So, you know, I hope he wins, and I hope he is more progressive than I expect him to be. If he joins the ranks of, you know, if he joins the ranks of the Ro Khannas and AOCs and Pramila Jayapals of the world, if he becomes like this extension of, obviously not the squad, because that's a very particularly a women of color thing, but if he joins those ranks of like the real progressive caucus, right? Not if he joins those ranks in Congress, like, I'll be very, very happy. And hell, I'll vote for him in the next New York primary. I still support the idea of Ashcraft running. I think that every congressperson should be held accountable. I think that's my car. Hello? So yeah, I hope he wins, and I hope he's a good legislator. But my gut instinct and everything that I like have come to understand about politics and stuff like that, it's difficult for me to believe that he's going to be as sincere on his progressive bona fides as he claims to be. But either way, we are primarying people. We're moving the New York Democratic Party to the left, finally. There it is. To the point where I've you know, no qualms voting for an establishment presidential candidate, because I'm creating a government that's going to push him left. And he is somebody who will, like, as the power moves to the left, so will his voting record, right? This is somebody who believes in civility and, like, bipartisan, not bipartisan, but, like, believes in, like, some perverted version of populist will that he mistakes the voices in his ear, the voices at his sides, for the will of the people. So if you put that populist element in his ecosystem, he will move on issues in a way that other Democrats never would, right? Especially because he's not looking to build a political career, right? He's done. This is going to be the last job he ever has. In a way that, like, doesn't even apply to Trump. Like, this is going to be Joe Biden's last job in his life. So he doesn't care about maintaining power. All he cares about is, like, governing in a way that he thinks is good, right? And it's a really naive and stupid vision in many ways. His perception of what good governance is. But the nice thing is he has no underlying loyalties that he will protect, right? His theory of governance is something that can be definitely gamed by the left, and particularly Ocasio-Cortez seems to have a good idea of, like, not specifically Joe Biden, but of how to play the game of building power in the government that Joe Biden would preside over. So but yeah, At the end of the day, Biden will increase access to healthcare, and Trump will cut it off. So, one of them's going to be president. Make sure it's the one that we want.
I said all there is to say.
And that's the calculation you should always just make to yourself as well, in my opinion. I think just tune everything else out. Obviously, individuals are going to have certain, like, I use this term, like, very, very seriously. People are going to have triggers, right? Like, there are certain things about Joe Biden that somebody who's specifically affected by certain issues is just not going to be personally able to like pull the lever for him, right? And I'm not here to judge any individual person, but presuming you don't have any of those issues, and you have to be very honest with yourself about what you're capable of, right? Don't make excuses, but also don't be like harsh on yourself, right? And once you get past all of that, just really like cut everything else out. Cut everything else out and treat it like a... Sam Seder has a Sam Seder has an MO on voting and politicians and electoral politics in general and government, which is quite simply that politicians are like code presets, essentially. Not sure that's the term he uses, but that's the term I'm using. They're like presets of code, where you're not exactly sure what the code will do. The only thing you can go off of is what it's done before. And you implement the code and you see what it's going to do. And if it gives you outputs that you like, you keep that in mind. If it gives you outputs you don't like, you keep that in mind as well. And you take into mind like what it does, what it doesn't do. For example, during the course of this campaign, you know, I went into this presidential primary being a huge fan of Elizabeth Warren. And I still, you know, I still like her. She's good for a lot of issues. But one thing I've learned about her is that she does not understand, I don't think she has a really solid theory of change when it comes to presidential politics. So that affects how I perceive her. So take that mentality into the ballot box with you, right? Get the names out of it. You're at a computer terminal. You have the choice of inputting like four or five different code presets. Your third-party candidates are defunct code. Like, for the most part, they're not going to accomplish anything. They're going to accomplish absolutely nothing. They're not going to change anything for the better or the worse. You're basically sitting out. You're choosing to input code that is entirely ornamental, and to the extent that your choice accomplishes anything, it will be in a symbolic sense. Which means that, by definition, it is less useful than anything with a material outcome to it. And your material choice is between two presets of code, one of which is going to minorly improve your outcomes, almost guaranteed that you're going to get a slightly better situation. You know, you're going to compile a little bit better, a little more effectively, a little more toward the result that you want. Minor, almost like maybe almost negligible, but probably not negligible. Definitely not to like the 50 to 300,000 people who are going to get healthcare. But that is going to be your choice for getting more people healthcare. And then the other one, almost guaranteed, is going to continue to gut and destroy the institutions of the system that you're trying to build and you're trying to rebuild. At that point, you have a choice, right? There's one piece of code with with significant, though minor, material positive outcomes, and then 3 or 4 pieces of code that are going to accomplish nothing or actively work to harm things and people. At which point the choice is very, very crystal clear, right? At which point the choice is easy. I want more people to have access to healthcare. And I'm going to vote in a way that accomplishes exactly that. And what will make Medicare for All a lot easier to pass in 10 years is having the route to that through a public option that can be passed in the next 4 years. That outcome will objectively make a single-payer healthcare system, a universal healthcare system, a lot easier to create, to build through the mechanisms built by a Biden care than by throwing away my vote on an ornamental, protest vote. So that's my calculation, right? And then come September or October, if, there's going to be people still voting for the Green Party, and if there's anyone voting for Green Party in the Midwest state, and I'm voting in New York, and they're interested in trading votes, and they're willing to vote for Joe Biden in exchange for me voting for, say, Howie Hawkins in a state that's going to go blue anyway, like, I'm happy to discuss that. But for the time being, like, my objective, get people healthcare, right? That's what I want. I want to get people healthcare. And I will do whatever it takes to accomplish that goal in the short term and through it in the long term. And in the short term, that means electing Joe Biden. And that's not up for debate. It is absolutely 100% inarguable. That the best way to improve access to healthcare in the short and long term is to elect Joe Biden right now. Because the damage that another Trump term will do is just going to, it's just going to eviscerate left power. It's going to eviscerate our chances at building the whatever universal healthcare system we build over the next 15, 20 years has to exist within the structures of what we have. And if we don't have those structures, we have to build them, and that's going to take extra time. So there is no political value in allowing those structures to be torn down. There's just none. So that's it. Elect Biden, get people healthcare. And then, fight every aspect of the institutions he protects. And those are two absolutely not mutually exclusive things. Cool. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube and you have been enjoying my political content, please like and subscribe for future videos. I will be doing a lot of research and probably doing a lot of talking. If you want to tune in live and participate in the chat, feel free to tune in. I stream on Twitch weekdays, 1 to 3 p.m., and it looks like politics is going to be our thing for the time being. So, if that's your thing, enjoy. If that's not your thing, there will be other content as well. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.